What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the show, man. Recap with Mo, where we getting ready to get down into another episode breakdown of Tyler Perry's Ruthless, alright? But before we get into this episode breakdown, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss shiznit that I got going down right here, alright? So let's go ahead and get into this episode. So the episode that we're going to talk about tonight is titled Eye for an Eye, episode number 8 of season 4. So the synopsis for this episode states that Marva takes advantage of Lacey in the most heinous way possible when dead bodies are discovered. Mack accuses Brian of being an addict. Aaron's attempt to flee fails miserably. Alright, so now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this episode breakdown. So we start this episode with the elder mother and Lacey. So Lacey, as we all know, has been, pretty much bed-bound, trying to recover from all the gunshots and shit like that because she was trying to escape previously in some episodes back, right? So the heinous doesn't know that she's technically alive at this point, so the elder mother has pretty much been keeping all of this shit to herself in hopes of appeasing the heinous, hoping that the heinous gives Lacey to her once again without failure so she can make an example or a spectacle of Lacey, right? So anyhow, the elder mother is actually getting ready to leave the facility when she looks up on the top shelf and notices the glass of water that Zane brought in to, give to Lacey. So the elder mother then turns around to Lacey and she was like, "Who has been in here?" And Lacey is like, "Oh, you brought the water in here, elder mother." And the elder mother's like, "No, I did not." And Lacey is going back and forth with the elder mother. And finally, the elder mother says, "I know exactly what I did and what I did not do. Are you assuming or are you saying that I am losing my mind?" And I was like, "Shut the hell up, Lacey, because you already know that the elder mother is crazy as hell. Like, you probably need to calm down." But anyhow, she goes back and forth anyway, and then all of a sudden she says, "Yes, elder mother," and then she starts to calm down a little bit. But by that time, the elder mother is she's already mad as hell anyhow. So then she smacks Lacey upside the face, and I was like, damn. She was like, "You try to make me sound like I'm crazy and shit." So anyhow, the elder mother leaves the facility, obviously, and I don't know if the elder mother actually recalls if she brought the water in or not, because the way that she was responding later on in this episode, it made me think a little bit that she possibly believed that she brought the water in there and just simply forgot. So I'm not sure if she's believing Lacey or not. But anyhow, man, from there we head back over to the sheriff's office where Cal is now coming over to speak to Desiree about what's going on with their investigation. So he comes over and he was like, right now they pretty much got nothing. And he's like, we pretty much got more questions than answers, right? So Desiree is like, well, hopefully Matt can come through with some shit because I've called him. He needs to get his ass up over here, like, on immediate, right? So Cal is like, well, Deputy Kate had identified Andrew previously, so he was like, well, did you give her a lineup? And Desiree is like, no, I didn't. And he was like, come on, Desiree, like, you're going to have to do this shit legit or we really won't have a case, essentially. And she was like, no, she knew exactly who Andrew was. Like, there was no doubt in Deputy Kate's mind that Andrew was the one that tied her up to the car or handcuffed her to the car, rather. I'm trying to do it in a record. I'm thinking in the Raku way, right? So anyhow, man, he was like, look, we got to do everything by the book so we can have a clean case, essentially. So from there, while they're in the midst of talking, another FBI agent comes over and he conveys to them that there was a fire at Agent Brian's house. But the forensic team hasn't been able to identify the bodies as of yet, so they have to wait for that information to come back. So they was like, well, Mack needs to hurry up and get his ass over here so we can figure all of this stuff out, right? So from there, we head back over to the compound where we see the elder Ruth now is, her almost sound like the elder mother. So anyway, we see Ruth, man, and so she's sitting there pissed off because right now she was like, where in the hell is this old woman? Like they are still technically waiting on the elder mother to come and prepare the after ceremony meal. So we find out later on that the meal is supposed to be given to them like every 3 hours or something like that, so they can stay on this high, right? So Laura, who's sitting there, she's still glassy-eyed or whatnot. She was like, well, what's in the meal? Like, I can make it. But Ruth pretty much conveys to her, like, no, you can't make it. It has to be made by the Raku. And she was like, okay, well, what's in it? But Ruth doesn't really tell her shit as usual, right? So then she turns to Laura and she's like, look, can you just stay right here? I need you to stay right here. And Laura reassures her that she's not going anywhere. And I believe that Laura's not going anywhere because she's high as hell. So she's still not going anywhere, right? So from there, we see Ruth going outside, and she's angry at this point. So she starts to yell out from the top of her lungs, like, has anyone seen the elder mother? So if you notice off to the right, we see Aaron, who is obviously sitting there waiting on the opportune time to get in there to speak to his wife. This man still has not learned. He's just simply going to have to learn that fat meat is greasy, and obviously he's just not a believer at this point that he's not in Kansas anymore. Bro, man, we'll talk about it later. So anyhow, we see Ruth leaves from the porch. She walks off looking, in search for the elder mother. And then we see Aaron making his way, off the table and on his way to the trailer to speak to Laura, obviously. So from there, we see the highest. Now, the highest has gone to see Malcolm, who is locked up in one of the punishment trailers and is tied up to the electrical chair, right? So when the highest gets into the building, he was like, it stinks in here, and his whole purpose of being there is to give Malcolm the drugs. That's pretty much why he's there. Or we're not going to say drugs on this channel. We're going to say the magic, right? So he's there to give Malcolm the magic that Daikon has just given to him that he does not trust, right? So when he gets there, he was like, I've heard that you're going through some shit. And he was like, yeah, I need something. And he was like, oh, I think I got what you want. So Malcolm then looks over and he sees the highest, shaking this package of the magic, right? So he was like, yeah, give it to me. So he was like, oh, you can ask better than that. You need to say, sir. I was like, sir? I thought it was... Like, no one has called you sir. Everybody has called you highest, but all of a sudden you want him to call you sir. So I'm like, okay. So anyhow, he gets Malcolm to say sir, and he's pretty much begging at this point for the magic. So I was like, give it to him, man. Like, go ahead and put him out of his misery. Allow him to feel the magic, right? So the highest just can't take the odor. He was like, oh shit, like, that's you? Like, no, I can't take the odors, man. So he was like, as a matter of fact, I'm going to postpone this situation right here, and I'm gonna send some women over to take care of this little situation, and once they're done, I'll come back and get down with you real quick. And Malcolm was like, hell no, man, like, give it to me. Like, as a matter of fact, bro, just give me the magic right now, and then they can come in and bathe me afterwards and shit. And he was like, oh no, he said, no, it has to be done right. So he then leaves the punishment trailer there, and he walks out, and he sees one of the security guards, and he tells him to go and get 2 women for him to come in and bathe Malcolm so he can deliver, the magic to him, right? So from there, he says, I got something else to do. So then he heads over to the other punishment trailer where we see George, who has been there like a damn soul because of the whole, ownership over the cell phone mishap, right? So just to recap a little bit, because this is what we talk about. This is recap with Mo, right? So George took ownership over Aaron's cell phone, situation, right? So while the highest was having his come to all meeting with all the men in the compound, Aaron was sitting front and center when his cell phone went off, and of course, the highest didn't like it. So he had him call his mom, and he was like, listen, I don't want no shit. Like, I need you to be straightforward. So Aaron lied and pretty much, I didn't call anybody. I haven't. So anyhow, that's why George is locked up in the trailer at this time. So when the highest comes in, he's like, how are you doing, George? Whatnot. And he was like, how are you doing, your highest? And he pretty much thanks him for taking ownership for the shit that went down. And he was like, do you love me? And he says, yes, your highest. And he was like, do you love Daikon? And he was like, yes, your highest. And he was like, well, where's your loyalty? Like, do you love me more than you love Daikon? And he was like, yes, your highest. Like, what the hell is it? You love everybody, right? You just try to say the right shit so you can stay the hell out of trouble. That's pretty much what George is doing right now. So the highest is pretty much, coming in, and he's trying to figure out what his punishment is going to be. And he just so happens to have a huge ass chain in his hands, right? So he was like, would you mind if I punish you with this chain? And George's response is, if that's what you want, your highest. So he was like, okay, take off your clothes. And I was like, come on, your highest, like, not like this, bro. So anyway, he just allows him to take off his shirt. He turns around, and the highest delivers about 7 or 8 blows to the back. And then the highest almost gets pissed off a little bit because he's like, shit, I can't break you. And he was like, your highest, I'm already broken and shit, because I just feel like they don't give you the joy that you need. And, I just feel like you deserve that joy. So the highest, falling for this shit, right? So he was like, so you believe that I deserve joy? And he was like, yes, your highest. So anyhow, man, so the highest is like, well, you've been a great soldier, you're a good soldier, and I'm gonna keep my eyes on you and shit like that. So George is like, yes, your highest. So from there, the highest leaves the punishment trailer, and George allows him to get out a little bit, and then he calls him a crazy MF. But you got to be careful with the highest, because the highest will, stay back a little bit to see if you're going to change your mind and shit. So the highest has obviously disappeared because he didn't come back into that thing. So George leaves the punishment trailer at that point, right? So from there, we head back to the highest's trailer where Daikon and River are counting the money. So while they are counting the money that they just got, almost $2 million in quotations, right? Because you know how I feel about that. I feel personally that the highest is not being honest about the money that he actually took. So if it's me, I'm probably leaning a little more so towards what Joan had conveyed previously in the previous episode. So Daikon is just now getting off the phone with Andrew, and River is observing. And once Daikon gets off the phone, he asks them, how does your cell phone work out here? And Daikon is like, look, bro, don't ask me no daggone questions. Like, why are you even talking to me? Now, Daikon has no feelings at all for River because he's jealous of River because, River is spending all the time with, the highest. And he wants to be booed up with the highest, right? For some damn reason. That's what he wants to do, right? So River's like, well, I just wanted to know because most people's phones don't work out here. So he was like, look, I need you to shut the hell up. So River, not heeding to what Daikon just said to him, he was like, well, I got something else to ask you about. So he says, well, why haven't you told him about me in the safe? And River's like, look, you're lucky as hell. Like, you just lucky right now. So he was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, just believe this. Your shit is running out. Your time is running out because I saw the way that the highest was looking at the new guy. And River's like, what new guy? And he was like, Aaron? He ain't worried about him. That's what River says, right? But Daikon is like, just give it some damn time, bro. Your time is getting ready to run out. So anyway, Daikon is still pissed off. He really doesn't want to have any conversations with River. So River, please shut up, because Daikon is the type of dude that would do anything to get your ass scratched. And I'm not talking about in a good way, River. You already know Daikon, because Daikon has already told you that all that stuff you do for the highest ain't for your pleasure, it's for his pleasure. And Daikon is like, you just need to leave me be. All right, so from there, man, we head back out and we head back to the sheriff's office. So Mack has finally showed up. So Desiree's like, send his ass on in here. And when he gets in there, she's like, have you heard? And he was like, yeah, I've heard. The forensics, hasn't came back yet on the situation, but he said, I got a hunch on what potentially happened. And she was like, well, let me know what you got. So he tries to give her this folder and try to explain to her essentially that he went through some of the emails of Brian, and what he conveyed to her was that Brian was going to commit suicide, but he was also going to get his wife, and I believe Malcolm as well. So he's assuming that the bodies that are at the house are the bodies of Brian and his wife. All right, his fine ass wife. So I'm gonna leave it at that shit. But anyhow, Cal was like, well, who was she having an affair with? And Matt pretty much says Malcolm Green, who is the one that's locked up in the punishment trailer back on the compound, right? So he was like, oh, I know that prick. Like, he's an asshole pretty much. So from there, they said, well, we need to figure all of this out. And then Desiree shares with Mack that she actually met the highest in person. So Mack is like, hold on, you saw him off the compound? And she was like, yeah, we actually saw him in a white Rolls Royce. So Mack is like, okay, maybe we can get him some, get him on some other shit, right? Because that car was listed as stolen from a wedding store in like Bonka Ranton or something like that. So from there, she was like, okay, we need to make this shit stick, right? So from there, we head back over to the compound where we see the women bathing, Malcolm in the trailer, right, getting him clean so the highest can come in there and, give him the magic. So from there, the highest comes back in. He was like, are y'all done and shit? And he was like, yes, your highest. So pretty much the highest gives him the magic. Now, old boy was a little nervous because he was like, yeah, go on and give it to me. But while the highest was preparing the magic, he was like, shit, that's a whole lot, bro. And he was like, do you want it or not? And he was like, yeah, give it to me. And he was like, what, do you want it? Whoop, whoop, whoop. So anyhow, he ended up giving him the magic in his arm and whatnot. And he pretty much passed out. So the highest didn't really care what happened to Malcolm. Like, he's like, if you survive, I'm good. If you don't survive, I'm good. But if you do survive, the better for me, because I got some magic that I can hold on to, right? So from there, Malcolm pretty much passes out and shit. And the highest is like yelling and shit. I don't even know what he's doing, man. This man is psychotic, bro. So from there, we head to the outside on the compound, and we see George is now talking to, damn, I forget his name. I keep wanting to call him Jeffrey. I know his name is not Jeffrey. It will come to me soon. I apologize, y'all. So anyhow, George is standing there. He has his shirt and everything back on, but he's still sore and shit. So he's like, well, what happened, bro? So he was like, man, that dude right there is crazy as hell, man. He beat my ass with a chain, man. He said my back is stinging and shit. So he was like, man, we gotta get the hell up out of here, like, quick in a hurry. So he was like, well, have you heard from Manny? And he was like, oh, man, we ain't dealing with him. Like, he done started believing this shit. So he was like, what you mean? He said, oh, he been talking about the Raku and all this. And he been talking about being enlightened. So he was like, what the hell you mean? And he was like, he been asking about being enlightened and shit. So he said, I told him about it, but he didn't believe it. He was like, oh, no. He said he might be into it for real. And and he said, well, we're going to have to find somebody else, right? So he suggested, River. But he says, I don't trust that, that MF, right? So from there, he said, well, we're going to have to find somebody else to move. because we gotta have one person for the getaway car. We gotta have 2 people for the money, and then we gotta have 2 other folks. So we need altogether 5 people. Right now, if it's just me and you without Maddie, then we're still short, right? So from there, it was like, okay, we'll figure it out. So then we head back over to the highest trailer where we still see River and Daikon still counting the money. They're almost done. And Daikon is talking to River like, look, with this one bill right here, my problems can be over. So River's like, what the hell are you talking about? He was like, look, if you don't leave me the hell alone, I'm going to tell the highest that you kept $100. And you know what the highest would do if you stole this money, right? So River is like, for real? And he was like, yes. Like, leave me the hell alone. So River's like, so Daikon, you think that somebody can come in and be a substitute for me? And Daikon is like, absolutely, but you need to recall that I got this bill right here, and if I say that this money is gone and River took it, River will be substitute. Oh man, I was like, come on, Daikon, man. So after they finish all the counting and shit like that, Daikon pretty much tells River ass to get up out. River's like, come on, we need to put the money away. But Daikon is not trying to let this brother know where the money is going, right? Because he does not trust him. I've already found your ass down at the safe. I don't need you taking these, quote unquote, almost $2 million or over $2 million. I don't need the money to disappear. So he sends River on his way or whatnot. So while River is walking in the compound, Manny comes up from behind and he was like, hey, River, I got to ask you something, right? So River's like, look, what do you want? And he was like, the highest, when he enlightens you, like, what does that really truly mean? Like, what is it? So now River is like, he's looking at Manny like, okay, why are you asking about this? So he was like, have you not been enlightened? And Manny is like, hell no, I ain't been enlightened, but I want to be enlightened. So he was like, well, why do you want to know what enlightening is? So he was like, well, the men who are enlightened can have a wife. And I'm trying to make this shit right because down below ain't working right. Like, I got to get all this shit down here together, right? So he feels like marrying Zane will bring his shit back together and make it right with the Raku. So he says, I think the Raku wants me to marry Zane. Because he was like, look what happened when I did wrong to her, right? So now River is like, so you know what happens when you are, enlightened by the highest? He was like, no. So he says, he has to stick his maker stick inside of you. And Manny was like, what the hell? Like, does that seem right to you? And he was like, well, that's the way of the Raku. And he was like, no, I think I'm going to have to pass. He was like, exactly. Shut the hell up about it. Don't ask no more about it. And as well as don't say nothing else about Zane. Marrying Zane, no shit. Stay away from Zane. Don't focus on Zane. Don't do shit with Zane. That's what I need you not to do. So anyway, man, from there, I think he's gotten the message now, specifically from River. The version from River has aided this whole situation with Maddie, right? So the next thing we see is River catching up with Zane, and she is extra excited to see River, and she tells him that she had the opportunity to, sit down and talk with Lacey. She's happy to see Lacey is still alive because she was feeling kind of sad, the fact that Paula and Lacey were no longer with her, she believed. So with her being able to sit down and talk to her, I think it put everything back into perspective, right? So pretty much she was like, look, we need to include her in our getaway. And at first he was cool with it, but then he was like, do you think she's going to be able to keep up? Because she doesn't move as fast as the rest of us. Definitely now that she's been shot, you know what I'm saying? So how is she going to be able to get away with all these injuries? Will she be able to keep up with us? And she was like, look, River, I am not leaving without my friend. So if you want to keep this shit together, look, we're going to have to work this out the best way we're going to have to work this out the best way possible, right? So from there, he was like, okay, it is what it is. He don't want to argue. So while they're still conversing, Maddie walks by and he has this look on his face like he really wants to, marry Zane, but he's also recalling what what River has just told this man. So, he don't want to get poked by the little stick, and so he wants to leave all of that shit alone. So right now he's pissed off because down below is not working right, and now he just found out that the only way he can become enlightened is for the highest to go up at him. So he was like, look, enough said, right? So Zane is like, look, I need him to stay away from me. River was like, no, you don't even have to worry about old boy no more. She was like, are you sure? He was like, definitely. You don't have to worry about him anymore. So anyway, man, going from there, we move from petty to more petty, because now we see Ruth, who has finally caught up with the elder mother, who is now chillaxing outside, waiting on the highest, outside of the punishment trailer, I believe. So Ruth is like, where the hell have you been? Like, I've been looking all over the place for you. Now, the damn compound is not that big, Ruth. But anyhow, she was like, I've been looking all over for you. Laura needs her, her plate. And she was like, oh, she can wait. And she was like, no, elder mother, you know that she needs to get her plate by a certain time period for the whole thing to remain active, right? And she was like, oh, I know, I would deal with it. I know, I would just up it up, all right? And she was like, I'm waiting for the highest. And Ruth tells her pretty much, like, the highest is not going to be pleased by what you're doing right now, because you need to make sure that you keep all these daggone folks in this compound high. So the only way you can do that is to continuously put shit in their food, unbeknownst to them, so, everything can stay fresh, all right? So she was like, okay, I got it. I deal with it when I get over there, but I'm waiting for the highest right now. So anyway, while she's in the midst of talking, Ruth going back and forth, elder mother going back and forth, and she was like, well, I would tell him. And that's how so they going back and forth, and when she says that, the highest pops out, and he was like, tell him what? So I was like, oh, hell no. So anyhow, so when he comes out, the elder mother changes her tune completely, and she was like, your highest, I need to talk to you, and I need to talk to you in privacy, right? And he was like, okay. And then she turns around and Ruth is still there. So he was like, what is it, Ruth? And he gets from her that the elder mother hasn't done the shit that he told her to do. He was like, why not? And he was like, you need to feed them every 3 hours, if you recall that from the very beginning of this video. And she was like, yeah, I would just open it up. I know exactly what I'm doing. He was like, okay. So from there, we're pretty much done with that whole conversation, but Ruth is still standing there, and the elder mother isn't saying shit until Ruth is gone. So the highest is like, look, Ruth, give us some time, all right? So from there, the elder mother goes on to say, your highest, I just really want you to listen to me very clearly. Lacey is still alive, and I did not tell you, but she survived the gunshots, right? And he was like, good, because I'm going to go kill her ass. She was like, no, your highest, I want you to give her to me. And he was like, what the hell? Like, I've already given her to you. Then she ran through my gate. You know what I'm saying? So she was like, no, she won't do that again. I promise you she will not do that again. But what she wants him to understand is she has a plan wholeheartedly that she feels is going to break Lacey, from the core. Number one, as she stated before, she's going to have her punished pretty much by wearing the robe of abomination. Nobody's going to talk to her ass. Nobody's going to aid her in her time of need. So she's already going to be in isolation. And then the next thing is she suggested that Daikon's men come in and seed her every day, making sure that she gets pregnant. So not only that, but she's going to have to deal with the tormented, the torment, let me correct myself, the torment of being laid up in by all of these in the compound. All right, even though she doesn't want them to be up in her, right? So I'm trying to keep this as clean as possible, but this is exactly what the elder mother is attempting to do to Lacey. She's literally trying to break her, right? So I'm like, this is sick as hell. Like, the elder mother is evil, and she's getting more and more evil. And I'm like, what the hell? She gotta go. She has to go. But anyhow, from there, she goes on to say, the last thing that she wants him to understand is that she's going to give him or provide for him 7 babies that are to be raised in the raccoon way, right? So he was like 7 babies. So I guess that's the key number for all of this shit, because all of this, he gave old boy about 7 or 8 strikes on the back with the chains, and now she's talking about 7 babies. So maybe that's a huge thing in the raccoon. I guess it's just like the Bible, right? But anyhow, so he was like, okay, well, are you willing to take that risk for Lacey? Because if this shit goes wrong, then you just know I got a sword that's ready for you. So she was like, huh? Like, out of all this shit I told you, you still talking about my life. So he was like, I just hope you know what you just bargained for. So I was like, see, you trying to be evil, it didn't work out for you, and now all of a sudden you pissed off, or you feel some type of way about it, because the highest ain't paying no attention to what you're talking about. He's about the results. Like, so I hope it pans out, elder mother. So anyway, man, going from there. Oh, by the way, the highest heard from the conversation. Obviously, I told you got to pay attention. They were going back and forth, and I'm just assuming now, I'm not sure for sure, but I'm assuming that the highest overheard the conversation, because he knew that Laura was still in the kitchen. I know that Ruth had said something about her not eating her meal, but how did he know to show up at the kitchen? Because the next scene, we see Aaron, who has snuck his ass up into the kitchen trailer, right? So Laura is still sitting there as he told Ruth she would, and Aaron is trying to convince her to get her ass up and roll out. She was like, I ain't going nowhere. I got a meal to eat, and he's trying to convince her not to eat the food that they are preparing for her. Like, they putting shit in your food. She was like, no, I'm here. I ain't going no damn well with you, because she's in love with the highest, bro. You're a little bit too late. You're a little bit too late, and he ain't gave her no love, bro. She's hooked. You know what I'm saying? So right now she's still under his spell, under the magic. So he just doesn't understand that, but he's getting ready to find out. I'm quite sure of it, because while he's still sitting there trying to convince his wife to come on and go and get up out, she looks up and she said, yes, your highest. So this nigga's like, what? And then she looks up, and I'm like, oh, hell no. Come on. And then when he turns around, he hesitates slightly, but then he slowly turns around, and there's the highest, and he's looking at this man like, shit, bro. He was like, why the hell are you in here? I was like, damn. So I'm telling you guys, the highest, man, he be sneaking around, and he be listening, man. Like, that's the way, that's the only way he can keep up with what's going on. So anyway, man, that's pretty much it for this episode. I hope that you guys enjoyed this recap. I enjoyed, I'm going to be honest, man, I'm actually enjoying Ruthless a lot better than I'm enjoying Sisters thus far, but I ain't gonna say nothing. Hopefully it'll get better. I'm not sure, I'm still a little pissed off about episode 1, but hopefully it gets better, man. But anyhow, man, let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know how you think this shit is going to go down next week, man. Just let me know. Leave a comment. Also, like and subscribe to this channel, all right? Talk to you guys soon. Peace.